It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Greg, we've got a special guest in store today, right?
I'm already glad to see him.
Well, he's already here with us, right here at the virtual studio.
Here I am. And there he is, right there. And I'm really looking forward to it because he's got a really interesting report about what's going on in real estate. By the way, if you see me looking this way, it's because I'm looking over here at the report to check it out because it's incredibly thorough.
That's right.
There's a ton of information here. We're going to take the high spots, but there's a lot to it, so we'll point everyone to it.
So let's connect the dots for the folks that may be listening. So first off, we've got Ward 10X Richmond with us here today, Executive Vice President and shareholder at Colliers International, one of the leading real estate firms in the world. Ward, good afternoon.
Hello. How are you guys doing? It's
doing
great
fantastic.
to see your faces. I wish I was in Atlanta with you.
Well, it's been too long. Great to have you back. And then to connect the dots on the other thing that Greg mentioned and kind of foreshadowed a bit, the report he's talking about. We're gonna be diving in with Ward on the U.S. Industrial Q1 2020 review, which is all about some of the key things you need to know in industrial real estate. Is that right, Ward?
Yes, sir. Looking forward to going over the high points of that report. And of course, you can find the entire report up on my website at supplychainrealestate.com. And this is our U.S. industrial report that we're going to start off talking about when we get into the industrial real estate world today. And it's a quarterly report that we put out with Colliers International. It's organized by our head of U.S. industrial research, Amanda Ortiz. And it's just an incredible comprehensive report that's a bunch of data gathered from all of the different markets throughout the United States related to industrial real estate activity.
You know what? You make me tired just hearing about all of that work that went into the exhaustive research that went into building this report. So before we dive into that, Greg, we want to learn a little bit more about Ward and get some good news. But for starters, Ward, in the Reader's Digest fashion, tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, I am based out of Dallas, Texas, born and raised here. After high school, I attended Brown University and then moved back to Dallas. I started my career in industrial real estate in 2006. So it's coming on almost 15 years now. I'm just past 14 years of doing this. And our team specializes in representing occupiers of industrial real estate globally. So those are the tenants that use the big warehouses and the big manufacturing facilities. So, we work with manufacturers and shippers and third-party logistics companies and trucking companies and pretty much everything you can imagine within the realm of the supply chain.
Love it.
And
if you got a problem related to, I love how you specialize, supply chain. You've talked in previous shows with us, the really importance to specialize in the real estate space. So if you've got a problem, real estate related or supply chain related, Ward can be a wonderful resource. And if it's not him, he's got a vast network that he leverages for his clients all the time. And as you can't tell, we're big fans. This is Ward's, probably a 6th or 7th appearance here on Supply Chain Now. Hey, before we talk good news, Ward, and you may break my legs for doing this later, but as a personal aside, I know you're a huge music artist, used to have a rock and roll tours globally. You're dropping some new music here next month, right?
I am.
Tell us more.
I've been playing music since I was in high school, and I actually, prior to beginning my career in industrial real estate, I was a professional touring musician in my 20s and retired from the road back in about 2006 when I started doing this. But since that time, I've still recorded a lot of music, written a lot of songs, and I still play shows. Actually, we just played a show the Saturday before COVID quarantine began, and the world flipped upside down. And it it was the only show we had booked for the year. So we normally play like 1 or 2 shows a year. But yeah, last year I wrote a bunch of new songs and went into the studio, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And assembled a band and worked with an incredible producer, and we made an album. So that album's coming out on my birthday on June 26th. So
what's the name of the album, Ward?
It is so the album is under my name, Ward Richmond, and the name of the album is called Highly Meditated.
Highly Meditated.
Love it. All right, so let's talk about some other good news, right, Greg?
Yeah. Tell us. I mean, aside from that, which is really, really great news, tell us what's top of your radar right now in terms of good news.
That is exciting news. The music. On another personal note, I'll just say, like, I've looked at this quarantine as an absolute blessing. I have spent more time with my children, and since quarantine than I would have to say than I did. And I'm talking real present quality time with them, not necessarily being in the same city or the house as them at the same time, but during this quarantine, then I would say in all of last year and this year combined. Mm-hmm. As you guys know, I used to travel a lot. I was away for work 70 nights last year, so I was constantly on the road. And then, of course, when I was home, part of my business was lots of entertaining and dinners and conferences and this and that. And I mean, we're going full speed ahead, and I'm at that stage in my career where I think it was the norm to do it. And I sensed there was something not great going on in terms of my quality time being spent with my young children. And then it came to, I just had a great awakening really since this all started, and I've gotten to spend so much time with them and watched our relationships just like exponentially improve. So that's been an incredible blessing on a personal front. On a business front, I can tell you when COVID happened, probably like most people, I was freaking out quite a bit. And who knows? And my income is purely transaction based. So I do not have, we get compensated when we close deals. And so when something like COVID occurs, there's undoubtedly going to be a slowdown in deal closing. And that's kind of scary when you're commission only 1099 employee like I am, and like all my team members are as well. And so it was a little scary, but I think the dust has settled, and our business is keeping on, and thankfully we're with a lot of incredible companies that are weathering the storm, and in some cases even thriving despite the circumstances, because as I'm sure you're all aware, there is going to be an uptick in the growth rate of e-commerce, which is going to be something that has a positive impact on my sector of specializing in industrial real estate. And
it's increase the number and types of distribution facilities as companies try to get closer and closer to the consumer. And we've lost a couple of pretty good sized retailers that may go completely away, or may go e-com only. Pier 1 just announced that they're going to close all of their stores. Maybe Ward, what we ought to do is tell them to just stick to e-com and get some industrial facilities and distribute.
I'm not going to speak about any companies specifically, but I can tell you that companies who have not adjusted to the e-commerce world that we're living in they're in a world of hurt. Yeah. If they don't have the supply chain infrastructure to support the growing demand for e-commerce and the Amazon effect, they're going to have a lot of trouble surviving in the 2020s, and especially post-COVID 2020. Yeah. And if you want to make that happen very quickly, I would say call a 3PL. There are lots of 3PLs out there that specialize in e-commerce, and that's what most of a lot of shippers are doing. It simplifies things. The 3PL specialize in e-commerce distribution for retailers, and that's all they do for a living is handle the distribution of that e-commerce product. So I think now, of course, there's lots of e-commerce companies who pride themselves on being in e-commerce, but I'm really specifically talking about retailers who might still be operating out of warehouses that they designed in the 90s.
Yeah.
And when I was in the 90s, there were a lot of retailers that were household name brands that I had to wear the latest brands of their clothing to when I went to high school so that I might be able to get a date. And they were so cool and so stylish and trendy. But the problem is on some of those companies, if you go to their website, then it's kind of a pain to order anything off of it, and it's going to be expensive and slow. And then I say, maybe I'll try this new brand that's on Instagram, and I can click one button and I pay with Apple, and it's at my house in one day, and I don't pay for the delivery.
Love
Yeah,
that.
a lot of the brands, a lot of the retailers we're seeing go belly up. We're staggering anyway.
Right.
Truthfully, we can mention the brands here. That's what we do. But JCPenney, Neiman Marcus, Macy's, several of them, not that they are all belly up in case any of you are shareholders, but they are all staggered and were staggered by e-com to begin with. And COVID has just been the straw that broke the camel's back for many of these companies. But that's a great suggestion. There are so many companies out there. I think the last time you were on, Ward, we talked with Tim Hinckley from Radial, who does 3PL services for e-commerce. And there are a ton of Shopify, of course, is really getting into that to try and compete directly with Amazon. And there are a ton of other companies doing that as well.
Yep. ABA. All right. So that's one of Greg's favorite acronyms. I love it. Anyone but Amazon.
It's good. Companies. Yeah.
Right. It's good to have healthy competition, right? Healthy competition. All right. Yeah. So Ward, moving right along as we dive into this report, you've already kind of laid the basis around just how exhaustive the research, the thousands of data points, everything that goes into making this a really credible piece of research for business leaders to look at and review. And this comes out every month from the Collier's team, right? Every quarter. Sorry, every quarter. Yeah. That's right.
That would be a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. And let me throw something else out there. This report tracks history of what happened in the first quarter of 2020. That was barely affected by COVID. So it's almost, I think it's worth talking about quickly to see what was going on in the U.S. Q1. I think what happens in Q2, 3, and 4 is going to be quite a different story than what we saw in Q1. And then on top of that, I also don't think it's going to be meaningful in terms of what's going to happen in 2021. So I don't think it's going to be like the beginning of some new long-term trend. It's just going to be like a short snapshot of what happens when the world shuts down for the first time in my life and how that impacts decisions getting made, which is it slows them down because everybody's just been scrambling to figure out how to operate in this new environment. And so let's talk about these numbers. They're pretty incredible stats. And I do think we'll see a slowdown in Q2, 3, and 4, and then probably a surge happening in 2021. Yep. So do you want to hop into some of the slides, Scott, and I can talk you through them?
Absolutely. And Greg, we're going to be moving fast and furious, so dive right in here.
Yep.
All right. So Ward, we're calling kind of your key insight number 1. Take it away.
Yeah. And feel free to stop me and ask questions if I'm speaking in real estate terms that don't make sense to you. But this is our key insight number 1, and that top left number, 63.5 million square feet, is the year-to-date overall net absorption. That is that's how many deals got done. So 63 million square feet of deals got signed in the U.S. For industrial real estate in Q1. Warehouse distribution rent rates are $6.18 per square foot on average. So those costs are per square foot per year is how that cost is being quoted. And it's also being quoted triple net. So that's not including your taxes or insurance or operating expenses. That's just your base rental rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So real quick, in some kind of context, some kind of historical context, $6, $6.18 per square foot. Is that a competitive rate, or what's your take on that?
I knew you were going to ask me that. So that's pretty high in the history of industrial real estate. I would guess that it kind of used to be 4 pre-Amazon Prime, and then it jumped to 5, and now that's above 6 level. And so that would be, I'm kind of guessing, but I bet I'm pretty close.
Yep.
And also to give you a feel how we get there, like in Dallas, if you're looking at the rates for the large distribution space, it's closer to $4 a foot, and then in other markets like Northern California, it's getting up there closer to $10 a foot. And so then you can just imagine how that works. Like markets like New Jersey, Seattle, LA, all have just a lot more barrier to entry than Dallas. So we have more land. It's just going to be lower priced. Chicago's and Atlanta are pretty close to Dallas pricing, I think, in general. Toronto is extremely high if you want to look into Canada. And that's because it's just tough to develop buildings in those in certain markets versus others.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. The overall vacancy rate is 5.2%. That's a very healthy vacancy rate and on the low side. And then product under construction is a whopping 330 million square feet of space.
So you say whopping, so clearly that's a huge number. Huge.
Well, that's a huge Q1 ever. Right? So a lot of these numbers are records or a substantial uptick from the previous year or previous quarter. So I know this is ancient history now, but Ward, what was the trend that we were seeing until, as you said, the world changed? What do you think was driving that? Was it e-com?
E-com. And yeah, it's the growth of e-commerce that's been driving it. And I heard someone speak the other day that is with one of the largest institutional landlords in the country. And I heard this stat that basically e-com growth has been growing at a clip of 15% per year. And that basically requires 500 million square feet of space, or 500 million square feet of demand for industrial real estate at that growth rate. So if because of COVID, people like my father started ordering their prescriptions and groceries via e-com, which he didn't used to do, and lots of other people in the world that did not used to use e-com have now almost been forced into it, but now also realize how awesome it is. And there's going to be an increase in the growth rate. So if the growth rate were to increase from 15% to 20%, I heard the stat that the demand could increase from 500 million to 900 million square feet. Wow. So that's quite incredible increase in demand that we could see if that growth rate does in fact increase, which most experts I've talked to on the matter think that will happen, despite not having a crystal ball.
We've talked about the amount that's built and the amount that's in process. Are we going there here soon? Or I don't want to jump ahead of us a little bit, but
Ward's the boss.
Yeah. I don't want to,
Ward, do you want to cover
ahead of any of your other metrics here? But we have talked about what's built versus what we expect demand to be and the impact that can have on pricing.
Yeah, of course, they expect the demand to be what's being built. So I think, but here's what's going to happen. This stat for everything under construction, some of this is going to get, the pause button is going to get hit because of COVID. If it hadn't officially started yet, or if it was super early stage, they're pausing it. Okay. So that number is probably higher than what's actual, is my guess.
Got it.
And then on top of that, there's a little bit of a hesitation, pause in demand as well. I think on this, especially smaller deals, and we're going to get into this, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a pause on demand. Suddenly, there's going to be a surge in demand. What I expect, and then also we might have a shortage of supply because people have hit the pause button right now due to COVID, and then that can create a whole another weird situation where you have like this momentary softening in the market, and then boom, like everything changes, and we don't have enough supply to accommodate the demand, and then that could be an issue.
Yeah.
Or the dark side of the moon is that the economy falls apart and nobody can afford to buy e-commerce, and then who knows what will happen. And I know that everyone hopes that does not occur. And obviously the solution to combat that is to get businesses back up and running as quickly and as safely as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
We're going to keep driving into key insight number 2. Are you ready, Ward and Greg?
I am ready.
All right. So now we're talking net absorption, which for folks like myself, you're going to have to explain that, and product under construction. So talk about what absorption means first.
Yeah, absorption is basically, if you imagine you've got a big market full of empty warehouses, how much of that empty space is going to get filled? And that's what the absorption numbers track. Gotcha. So you can see the number one market, Q1, was the Inland Empire. That is the market. In case you're not familiar with that, it's outside of Los Angeles. It is like Ontario, California, where the airport is there in Ontario, California. That is just like the prime hotspot for building these monstrous warehouses that basically sit outside of Los Angeles and service the greater LA area. And so that's just a huge market. They've had 10 million square feet of absorption. My hometown of Dallas-Fort Worth is number 2 with 8 million. And then you can see Chicago, Houston, Kansas City, Baltimore, and northern New Jersey are all trailing that. So
Got it.
The next slide there, did you have any other questions, or does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. You're still, when you say the next slide, you're talking about the product under construction next. Is that work? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And that is hometown Dallas, Texas is leading the charge with that, with 35 million square feet under construction, followed by Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, LA. Hey,
real quick, Ward, Greg and I both are really familiar with why Atlanta there is number 2 and some of the factors behind that. It's a great city to do anything supply chain and technology or logistics or you name it. Ward, what's some of the things off the top of your head that make DFW in that area such a great market?
Okay. Well, we have incredible highway infrastructure. We have lots of different interstates running through the DFW Metroplex. We also have 2 intermodals, one serviced by the BNSF Railroad, one serviced by the Union Pacific Railroad. We have an industrial-only airport at Alliance Airport. We have DFW Airport, which is one of the most active airports in the world for freight and for passenger travel. And then on top of that, we have a very, very fast-growing population. And I don't have population stats on DFW, and I'm just not good at remembering things like that. But I mean, I know here's what I know is that there used to not be traffic, and now I think the traffic here is just almost as bad as the traffic in Los Angeles. Wow. It gets worse every day because people keep moving here, and that's fantastic. So people move here because there's a low cost of living. Right. There's lots of jobs. There's lots of companies that are moving here because we have incredible infrastructure for office space. We have an incredible labor pool. There's no state income tax. We're central time zone. Being a guy that flew 70 nights last year, or was away 70 nights last year, I can fly anywhere in North America in basically 3 hours or less. Toronto, Mexico City, LA, New York, wherever I want to go. Atlanta's like 2 hours. So it's just very convenient to live here. I can do business on the East and West Coast and never have to really adjust my time too much. So that's nice. And
hey, I'm sold. Yeah. I'm buying a house for tomorrow.
Can you tell I live? Can you tell like I do this?
He's a homer
on a daily basis.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. Well, it just makes sense. And there's a lot of big distributors that come here, and it's located right in the middle of the country for the most part. And the population growth, and yeah, I think that's it. And we have great labor, and it's affordable, and it's low cost of living. And there's lots of land here, so you can keep building, and the land is so inexpensive. If you go get land, I mean, like in LA, I think it's like $20 to $40 a foot, and Dallas is like, you can go get land for $3 to $5 a foot.
Well, you know what? We saw some of that available land, Greg, as we ventured out in the Supply Chain Now van to Austin for the EFT conference way back before the world changed last November. And beyond the great food, man, there was business expansion everywhere, it seemed. Of course, that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, I tell you, Austin doesn't actually have even anywhere close to the amount of land supply that we have, because the topography there, and they have lakes and rivers and hills, and Dallas is just flatter.
Yeah.
So, and we have a lot better highway infrastructure to support the growing population. I think Austin, if you go there, if I think the traffic's bad in Dallas, traffic in Austin is brutal. And I love Austin so much. And I always say I want to move there whenever I go there, especially the rock and roller in me, and that I'm a singer-songwriter, and that's such a huge part of the culture in Austin. Yes. So I love it, but the traffic's brutal, and they just haven't really designed the roads to support it the way that we have in DFW.
So let me get Greg. So we're getting a ton of information here from Ward, and I love it because it's not all focused just on real estate. It's a lot of business observations that whether you're looking for a site or you're looking for a job, it might be helpful. Greg, what's any key observation from this information data thus far on your end?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here is you're seeing a lot of those marketplaces that are the lesser, even of the relatively costly, they are the lesser costly at critical crossroads, like Ward is talking about. In Atlanta, we have 3 interstates that go right through the middle of the city, and that has its blessings and curses. Chicago, Houston, Kansas City that you mentioned, all center of the country, right? And with port access and or transportation access, or in the case of some of these cities, Kansas City has always been a transportation hub, literally the center of the United States of America. It is. So there are a lot of those things. Even Inland Empire, Ward, if you think about that, even though relatively expensive because it's California, it's much, much less expensive than it is in the larger LA or NorCal areas, right?
Exactly. You're exactly right on all points.
Is that migration of industry. And now, as we've started to see with COVID, we'll start to see migration of workers around the country, because as companies cease to require on-site work, you can live anywhere.
Right.
And I just published an article posted an article on LinkedIn about that very thing. Why would people stay in Silicon Valley, right, when they can now work from anywhere? Facebook, Twitter, Google, several companies have allowed their people who already work some from home to work solely from home.
Right.
And companies and people are already flocking to Texas and Arizona and Georgia and other states from the expensive marketplaces around the country.
We'll
continue to see that impact. I think office to some extent, maybe hoteling or shared office space, and home real estate as well.
Yep. All right, Ward, react to that or piggyback on the commentary before we move on to key insight number 3.
Do you think I could pull off living in Maui with the time difference?
Yes.
It's funny. It's funny how many people, I asked people, okay, if you could work from anywhere you wanted to, where would you choose? And it was amazing how almost right off the bat, people designated themselves as beach tribe or mountain tribe. I don't know if you've ever heard those terms. Those are kind of terms, but it was interesting how quickly somebody went, I'm going to the lake and the mountains, I'm going to the beach, whatever, right?
Totally.
So it is interesting, and people are seriously thinking about it.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and you can. And I'll tell you, I agree with all those thoughts. And one thing I did forget to mention about Texas is the government, the state of Texas, and the local municipalities and those government incentives they're super business friendly. We're opening up right now pretty aggressively. Thankfully, I got to go to a yoga class this morning that opened back up. They're handling it very safely. They're doing social distancing, but they're opening back up, so they can like actually operate a business.
So you can stay heavily meditated, right?
I try to. So yeah, but I mean, I agree with all of that. And the office and we can talk about, maybe once we get through this report, we can talk a little bit about trends I think we've seen due to COVID in real estate in general. And so this next slide just gives you, I think a lot of your listeners would be interested to see this. This is who's taking all the space. When we talk about the space getting absorbed, here's who's taking it. So the number one taker, third-party logistics and packaging companies. No big surprise there. That's because those retailers are shifting their product to these 3PLs, and 3PLs are taking down the space on their behalf.
Right.
We've seen a big surge in 3PL activity since COVID, and they're in lots of parts of the supply chain, primarily e-commerce, food, electronics. And right behind that is general retail and wholesale. Now you're going to see that, and a lot of those retailers are signing leases because they can sign longer term leases directly with the landlords and utilize their balance sheets to get better deals than a 3PL who may only have a 3-year contract. So you're seeing these shippers go sign the actual lease, even though the 3PL might be handling all of the inventory and moving everything around. So that's something important to note, and that's why that's 23%. But I mean, I would imagine that a significant portion of that 23% is actually being run by 3PLs, even though the actual lease is getting signed by retailers, wholesalers. So that 3PL number could really be much larger than it appears here, even though it's still they're the top takers of space. And then manufacturing's behind it. There's been a lot of talk that there's going to be some onshoring and nearshoring of manufacturing going on because of all of this, and the continued trade war that's happening, and that seems to be heating back up again after you kind of didn't hear anything about it for a while. Now it's back.
Right. That's right. Well, Greg, you were talking on the Buzz just a couple of days ago about the survey that Supply Chain Dive covered. 64%, I believe, was the number of manufacturers that plan on doing some level of reshoring or nearshoring, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so many companies are moving to this China plus 1, 2, 3, or they're at least looking at reshoring manufacturing or nearshoring. In the very least, I believe we'll see an uptick. I get nothing from making these predictions. So I believe that we'll see an uptick in industrial space used for manufacturing because companies will at least facilitate a secondary sourcing option, nearshore, onshore, something like that.
Right.
Yep. And I think you're going to see a lot of that happening in Mexico, and there should be a big uptick in activity in markets close to the Mexico border. Yeah. And I've actually heard Houston come up a lot, and as that would be a great. I've heard some people say they expect to see some big growth in Houston since due to its proximity to the border, and potentially being impacted by that, which would be great for Houston due to the current oil situation going on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right.
Cool. And last but not least, we have one more slide. Yeah. Now here are the names of some of these occupiers that are taking the space, and it's Greg's favorite company at the top of the list. I don't know. I don't know if that. It's hard to track these exact numbers. We do our best to do it. I can tell you, Amazon, it says 6 million square feet in Q1 2020. I can tell you in Dallas, they took 1.5 million square feet, and they're about to sign another million square foot lease, is what I hear. So that's 2.5 million just in Dallas, probably before June. And they've been aggressively going after space since COVID started. As Jeff Bezos, I've heard, was on his way to becoming the first trillionaire.
Wow.
Right. And they haven't slowed the construction. At least I haven't heard of any slowing of the construction or even remodeling of current spaces. So they are very aggressively tackling this market. They took some positions in terms of how to fulfill, knowing that any harm they did to themselves or even their sellers in the short term by cutting off non-essential goods, they knew they would get back, realizing that e-commerce, as we've just talked about, will come back in greater measure than it even was when COVID initially happened. So,
right.
That's a great point, Greg. And I've been stressing this to a lot of my clients. Some companies out there have been a little bit short-sighted on how to try to generate value due to COVID. And the first strategy I think that popped to everyone's mind is, let's go get rent abatements. Let's go see if we can defer paying rent, because
save our way to success.
This is crazy. Exactly. And I naturally felt that way too at first. And then after I let it sink in for a few weeks, and it's like, okay, the world is not ending. We're going to get out of this. Oh man, now you have this little momentary softness in the market. Go sign some big ass leases. That's what I'd be doing. Assuming you're not like about to go out of business because of COVID. I'm not talking about those companies. They obviously need to focus on the short term and try to get all the help they can get to survive. But those companies that are not as worried about surviving, I think it's an opportune time to call me and go find some deals.
There we go. And there
we can find some deals
right there for you.
There you go.
That's not unique to real estate, Ward. I mean, I'm on the board of a couple of technology companies, one in the cannabis industry where demand went through the roof immediately. And the other is in supply chain technology, and saw a very similar thing. Those companies that were already strong or in a position to get strong, they're taking advantage of this to separate themselves from their competition. This has a similar effect that I recall to the Great Recession back in 2008 to 2013. So you're right. There are a lot of really strong companies that will come out of this in much, much better position in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and lots of Atlanta companies on here, like Home Depot, Floor & Decor, I believe, is out of Atlanta. Is that right?
Correct.
Right.
I went to Lowe's the other day. They're on this list of top occupiers. I started a garden in my backyard with my 6-year-old daughter. I've never done that before.
Haven't
awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, we do. I just went. Lowe's is pretty close. Is the closest one of all those big, gardening type places next to my house. And you go there, and it's packed.
Yeah.
Packed. So super, super exciting to see these companies on here that are getting after it. And I think, and I've heard that in general there was pretty big slowdown in activity in April, and now it's heating back up again, and especially on the larger deals around e-commerce and food.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, there's so many companies have seen an uptick. Walmart had a 74% increase in e-commerce sales during the COVID period.
And they're obviously making the announcement of the one-day delivery. I can't remember what they named that service. I think something obviously that competes with Amazon Prime, but they sped up that time frame because of everything that was taking place with the quarantine and the ramp up and as Ward put it, folks that typically didn't like to get their groceries or other items delivered, they like being in the stores.
Right.
Folks are finding how convenient it is to get all that stuff delivered, to your home. So it'll be, as we've said before, Greg, really interesting to see Walmart take all the punches it's taken in recent years as it tries to figure out its e-commerce strategy and make some breakthrough moments especially in the last 12 months or so. So it's really neat to see. All right. So for folks that are viewing this video, you can clearly you got Ward Richmond's contact information. And if you are listening to this episode, maybe you can check him out at supplychainrealestate.com for content, resources, and of course, if you want to connect with him. Just want to point that out. But we're not done with Ward just yet, because we want to make sure, Greg, from current market activity, give us an observation or two there, right?
Yeah. Tell us about tell us what you're seeing in terms of what's going on, and maybe even I know you don't have a crystal ball, but maybe even what you see coming. It's just one man's opinion, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing to think about is everyone's having to change the way they operate. So they're doing temperature checks at these warehouses. If there's some kind of if there's some people getting sick, you might have to go clean these warehouses. That could be a 2 to 3 day process for a 500,000 square foot distribution center. There's been pay hikes for the workers, for these essential employees that are going out there and working in these warehouses. I've been in an Amazon warehouse, and I mean, I can only imagine the fear that some of those people might feel when they walk in there at the beginning of all of this. I mean, I felt nervous going to the gas station because my uncle got me paranoid about touching the gas pump, and then I can only imagine going into an Amazon distribution center and how that must feel. So they're training all of these employees on how to promote social distancing and restructuring the flow of employees. That's happening in every sector of commercial real estate, from multifamily apartment complexes to retail to office and industrial. Like, you're having to have this new flow and put up these screens and elevators. If you have elevators, how many people can be in them? My yoga class, we had to wear a mask to go in. It's a locally owned yoga place, so we could actually practice without the mask, which was great, so I didn't pass out. But they're like Core Power Yoga, where I go in Atlanta, is a chain, so they have like 20 locations across the country, and I'm a member there because of how often I travel. And I've heard that they actually make you wear a mask when you do yoga. So I know some places are having you do that, and it's just going to vary from company to company, but you have to take all these precautions. And then,
hey, real quick, Ward,
yeah,
going back to workforce, some of the things we're seeing there. The U.S. government has frozen certain aspects of the American with Disabilities Act, so that employers could take temperature of their workforce as they enter the plants. And
that's actually a violation of ADA.
That's right.
Yep. That's happening, and that's happening everywhere. That happened at yoga today. They took my temperature there right when I walked in.
So, what was it? Just out of curiosity.
It was like 98.7. I don't know. Thankfully, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I run a little cold.
So, office space, that's kind of retail, office, a little scary. I think multifamily scary because a lot of people that are renting apartments have been living month to month, evidently, and they don't have jobs, or they're getting furloughed, and so many people are getting laid off. They're not going to be able to pay their rent. That's what the concern is there. Retail, they've been forced to be shut down. I was talking to my friends. I have, from my days as a musician, I have a lot of bar owner friends, and because my band used to play at a lot of bars and nightclubs, and so I still am just really tied into those people in that industry. And they can open back up this Friday in Dallas. The bars can. But one of my good friends, she has a couple bars in Dallas, and she's not even going to open back up because you have to operate at 25% capacity, and you can't stand next to the bar. And she's like, what am I going to do when they get drunk at the bar? And then I'm trying to tell them to not stand at the bar. It sounds really tough on a lot of these businesses. And I know there's been, it's just kind of weird. Because
no easy solutions for sure.
There's a lot of restaurants and bars that were barely making it month to month, staying alive, and now you got to operate at 25%. I don't understand really how it works. But that being said, offices are also going to change. I have many close friends and clients that have hundreds, if not thousands, of employees that have lots of office space. And I do a lot of office space deals too, because a lot of my clients have a lot of office space. And they're rethinking it. So different things that are happening there, they're shifting presence. They're doing A days and B days, where certain percentage of employees continue to work from home full time. A certain percentage have to come back to the office, but they're coming on different days. Another thing, they're shutting down all these trendy things that you used to do, like have more or like a smaller per square foot per person ratio to maximize to get more bang for your buck, not have to take quite as much office space. They were doing sharing work desks, workspaces, and all of that, like that's going to have to go in the opposite direction. So they're going to have more per square foot per person, and they're going to have dedicated desks, or you're going to have to clean the desk every time someone leaves it.
Right.
So that's going to be kind of different. And then I have one of my good friends, they have 4-5 offices across the country, and he told me they're subleasing all their space now, and they're just going to lease some dedicated meeting space for their employees to use for dedicated meetings. And if he wants to get the whole company together, he'll go rent out patios at restaurants to get groups of less than 50 together. So in public transportation, something else that's going to be a concern. In inner city, urban environments that were becoming the thing, and everybody's moving back to the city. Now there might be a little bit of a move back to the suburbs because there's going to be more room to park. They're not going to have to put their employees at risk of riding on trains. And everybody's very concerned about the health and well-being and the safety, and of course, just the culture and how they're going to make their employees feel. And
That's
they
good.
want their employees to feel they're being taken care of.
That is a silver lining.
Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
I was going to say that's a silver lining in all this, right? We've been banging the drum for a while. Of course, the frontline medical folks got to be protected, first responders. But man, the end-to-end supply chain, the truck drivers, the pickers, packers, you name it, they keep the country moving. They keep the world moving, and wrapping them up and protecting them. I hope that's one of the big silver linings that comes out of all of this. Greg, what were you going to say?
E-bike sales are up dramatically because people are trying to avoid public transportation. There was already concerns about what the term I heard used by some of the commercial real estate people I know, phantom leases, where the space had already been abandoned, but the lease had not gone up. The last company that I had, one of the things that we were working on was how to tell whether space that was leased was actually being used, so that the landlord would not be caught off guard when the lease turned up. So this will be the opposite of good news for office space. I can assure you of that.
The only thing they have going for it is that you're going to have to take more office space per person than you used to. And that might have some balancing effect, but the overall impact, I would guess, is going to be net negative. In terms of spend on office space, it's going to go down. Therefore, pricing will go down. And I mean, the demand's definitely, I don't see it not going down.
Yeah.
And people like working from home. We ran a survey, and it showed that like the majority of people wanted to work from home, I believe 3 days a week. And that's what I answered. And I already worked from home a lot, and I was on the road all the time anyway. So I was very accustomed to just being a very remote worker.
Right.
But a lot of people never got to experience the freedom of that, and now they have, and they don't want to go back, and they're more efficient. They're getting more work done, and actually, in some cases, they're like working 3 extra hours a day because they're not traveling. And so, I mean, their employers are pretty pumped about it. And for those people, I would remind you that you need to control your schedule when you have that kind of freedom, like I've thankfully had for a long time with my type of job. And you need to make sure you're not working yourself to death, and you block your time and as needed and appropriately, so that you're not working too hard.
So we gotta. Hey, so real quick. So in light of that picture you painted, where there won't be as much demand, you don't think, for real estate, certainly office space, while industrial space, given e-commerce, some other trends, you got to partner with a specialized resource to make sure that you're getting the full picture, right? And making sure you have all options at the table. That it seems to me that specialization right now, whether it's a 3PL, whether it's a real estate broker or resource or many other things, it perhaps is more important than what it has been in recent months. Agreed, Ward?
It's undoubtedly that.
It's equally important, but now people are just finally maybe realizing it for the first time.
Gotcha.
I think I agree completely with that. And I think it's rare to find someone like Ward who has a realistic perspective. I don't want to say realistic, but a balanced perspective on the marketplace. what I find very often is that, and this is the nature of the person who does the job. Real estate agents are inherently optimistic, and they often ignore the realities of the marketplace because they want to believe that it will always be up. And Ward takes a very balanced approach. He knows not just the real estate business, he knows the supply chain business, and he can balance that perspective from knowing that as well. So if you don't get help from Ward, get help from somebody like Ward, who has that balanced perspective, or triangulate amongst a number of professionals to try and get a balanced perspective.
Love that. All right. So
thank you so much for the kind words, brother.
You bet.
It's true, man.
Hey, it's all genuine, or we wouldn't be saying it, especially that
I know.
guy. Especially
I know.
Hey, so let's do this. I know for the sake of time, I know, Ward, you've got a slew of meetings before we wrap up here, or before we wrap up the day. Let's make sure that folks know how to get in touch with you. So where can they find you?
They can find me at supplychainrealestate.com. And that's the best, man. I've got everything there, from the market overview we discussed. I have a DFW specific market overview. All the podcasts that we've done together up on the website. I have a video telling you exactly what our team does, and case studies showing how we've generated tens of millions of dollars of savings for our clients, who include some of the most incredible companies in the world, like FedEx and Ryder and DB Schenker, TFI International, and Keller Logistics, Palmer Logistics. We have so many incredible customers. We're very thankful during this time to be working with these companies and helping them to take their supply chains to the next level.
The syndicate, the supply chain syndicate.
That's right, baby.
That's your team, right?
Yeah, that's what we call ourselves.
And I love that video y'all did. I think y'all published that probably 6 months or so. It really personalizes the team, and y'all have got a ton of passion and a ton of expertise. So we always love to have you on, and look forward to reconnecting with you again soon. Greg, I gotta with Ward still here, before we wrap up, I gotta ask you for your one key hot take before we conclude today's session.
Well, for industrial space and a lot of commercial space, it's going to get a lot better. For office space, I'm a firm believer it's going to get a lot worse. But the most important hot take for today is wardrichmond.com.
Hey, always a pleasure.
He is a trained professional at what he does, no matter what it is. So check out his music, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Awesome. Hey, Ward, thanks so much for joining us. But sit tight for a second. We're going to wrap up in lightning round speed. Give us 2 minutes. We've got a couple of upcoming events that I'm not even sure if you're aware of, Ward, what we've got tracking here. So starting with supply chain trivia. Who would have thought supply chain trivia would be such a thing? However, this has been popular. Folks want to kind of de-stress. Ward, you need to jump into competition. I bet you'd be a fierce competitor. Next round is June 3rd, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We're doing that, Greg, because it's our Eastern Hemisphere edition, right?
Yeah, that's right. This is our Eastern Hemisphere edition. We had Hride Grandi this past week, or past round, and the round before, Nikhil Wadhwa, both doing great at 2:30 in the morning. So we want to see how good they are during office hours.
That's right. Our current champ is Kobe Cannoli. He didn't miss a single question last go around. So we're looking forward to partnering with APICS, which is a great group doing big things in supply chain across the continent of Africa. So join us June 3rd at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then let's see, before we even get to trivia, we've got the Mike Griswold with Gartner. That their top 25 supply chain for 2020 was just released in the last couple of days.
Yeah,
he's joining us on May 27th. What's he going to talk about, Greg?
Well, he's going to talk about some of the key takeaways from that. Look, if you're in the supply chain industry, I would encourage you, Ward, to have your clients take a look at this, because we're going to talk about some of the key takeaways. You don't have to pay for a report. You don't have to be a Gartner subscriber, but you can still hear from the top retail and supply chain analyst at Gartner, Mike Griswold, and learn something that will benefit your business. Whether you're big or small, you're a retailer, manufacturer, distributor, or otherwise, you're going to learn something that's going to help you improve your business.
Hey, Mike Griswold is the Tom Brady of supply chain ranking. Is that Greg, I know that we probably should
I
use.
think he'd probably appreciate John Wooden, but most people don't know who John Wooden is. So I think he'd take Tom Brady. Yeah, he's also a basketball coach. Another professional with a side hustle that gives back as well. Mike Griswold.
All right, so Ward, we got to count on you being there because I bet you can contribute a lot to the conversation with these webinars. We always have a very lively Q&A, both comments and observations as well as questions from the audience. So we invite all of our friends to join us May 27th at 12 noon Eastern Daylight Time. SupplyChainRealEstate.com, SupplyChainNowRadio.com. Those are the places. We'll have it in the show notes. Ward, I'm going to give you the last word before we wrap up here.
All right. Well, everybody take care out there. Stay safe. And just, I think it's a great time to keep your head down. And if you look at the history of business in the United States of America, some of the most incredible companies have been formed in moments like this, at times of economic recessions. That's when you have an opportunity to go make some big moves and take advantage of this current landscape. So I think it's important to just stay focused and stay productive. And and I'm hopeful that this all hopefully come to an end and return to some sort of normalcy soon.
That's right.
Amen.
I couldn't imagine the new normal's around the corner. We've seen some great positivity here. The light in the tunnel. Brighter days do lie ahead. Ward, I loved how you ended it. And Greg, on that note, we want to tell everybody thanks for joining us here today. Stay safe and join us next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.